It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day and welcome once again to the Two Jacks, coming to you jointly from Hong Kong and from Sydney, or parts thereabouts. And joining me as usual is Hong Kong Jack in Hong Kong, unsurprisingly. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm just thinking about Bob Catter rabbiting on about people being torn to death by crocodiles in far north Queensland.
Well, that was his response to the same-sex marriage.
It doesn't just happen in far north Queensland. A crocodile farmer near Siem Reap. Siem Reap's a dusty little French colonial town near Angkor Wat.
Yes.
Been there myself. Quite nice little place. One day doing the temples was enough for me, but still. This chap, a 72-year-old, he was trying to move one of the egg-laying crocodiles out of its cage with a stick. Ooh. And the crocodile grabbed out of the hold of the stick, and he wasn't smart enough to let the other end go, and it dragged him into the cage, and they had a little chomp on him.
Yeah, I presume he hasn't survived.
No, he had a lot of bites on him, they said, which made it sound like a mosquito attack, really, but there was one arm missing.
Oh, dear.
Quite a few crocodile farms in the area, and a 2-year-old girl went missing last year.
Oh, dear. I went to a crocodile farm, took my wife and children there when they were quite young. It's a place south of Cairns, and one the thing that should have given me pause at the start was when the young blokes who were sort of acting as scouts and employees of this place. One of them came up to me and goes, "I haven't got a clue what to do, mate. It's my first day." And they give him a bucket of chicken heads and a plastic rake, and that's basically your defence. Yeah. My wife and I and 2 children walked past this. It was chicken wire sort of thing, and there were female crocodiles, and they'd just dropped their eggs, and that means that they get in there and they'll take the eggs away.
Yeah.
And so the female crocodiles were savage, they were vicious. They were chewing at the cage to get out. And I just said to Jen, I said, let's get the hell out of here. Yeah. This is not going to end well. And then we walked past and this old bloke's just sitting on top of probably a 4-metre crocodile. Yeah. Patting it on the head. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those things hold absolutely zero fascination for me.
Yep.
Well, look, globally, Jack, the mini-series Succession in its 3rd series, not a mini-series, it was a series of, 30 episodes in total. The finale ran last night, and at the end, I'd have to say it was a little bit of a disappointment. Now, I know you haven't seen it, Jack. And it's
too busy watching Q&A myself.
Oh, so you must only do this for the program because there's no other reason, other humanly acceptable reason why you would be doing it. But look, Succession has been beautiful to watch, brilliantly shot in wonderful locations around the world, a great cast and a wonderful script, wonderful writing in it. But for the life of me, I couldn't understand why they did the 3rd series. The death of Logan Roy, the family patriarch, based loosely on Rupert Murdoch, that occurred sort of midway through the 3rd series. And for mine, the series should have ended at the end of the 2nd one when Logan actually stitched up the kids and took control of everything. But unfortunately, it was streaming too well, so they went with a 3rd. Still worth it. Still worth your time, though, Jack, if you want to get around to it. It is rather cleverly done.
Well, Q&A was interesting last night. The Aboriginal person was easy to find because he was wearing a Aboriginal flag about a metre wide on his chest. So
I did see the intro, and PK, Patricia Carvelis, was doing the hosting job there, and of course Stan Grant has stood down for a period of time. But that was as far as I got with it, Jack. I did see, what's his name, the member for Gellibrand was there from Labor.
I didn't pay much attention to it, to be honest. It was on in the background.
You should have been watching Succession. Four Corners did a very good episode there on how a lot of churches, religious organisations, not just Catholics, are using the death of the perpetrators to avoid and reduce their compensation payouts. So that was well worth a look. I think there are other things to have a look at there. And one victim got in touch with me throughout the program, so he's got some complaints. We might even talk about them in another episode, Jack, but we must kick off with Australia because the shock announcement from Premier McGowan in Western Australia, it did shock everybody. I think it shocked his own side as much as anybody. He's been called by the media a rock star, just about by everyone. I don't think he's much of a rock star, to be honest, but he did in fact have a satisfaction rating of 88% in Newspoll, Jack, at one particular point. He still remains extremely popular. And in the last state election, I think he won a two-party preferred about 68-32 and wiped the Liberals off the electoral map. Quite the politician, Jack.
A very successful politician. He got off to a pretty good start. His first ministry, he was Minister for Tourism, Racing,
Gaming,
and the hotels. I personally, I would have stayed there forever.
Here's the job that you and I have both courted. If we ever got into politics, that would be the one we'd be after.
I was about 75, I reckon. But a very successful politician. And to be fair, part of the reason for his very high approval ratings and his success is that it's a very provincial town, Perth. If you're seen as standing up and for Western Australia against the rest of the country and the rest of the world, you are going to have skyrocketing approval ratings.
No, without wanting to be rude to our Perth people, this is not rude. This is a fact. It is the most isolated city on earth. It's far away from a number of other cities, the nearest city sort of thing, they do feel that. I've done a lot of work in Perth, and they do feel that sense of isolation quite acutely. But I think there's more to it than that. Firstly, as I said, he's wiped the Liberal Party essentially off the map. There will be a state election there in 20 months' time, and this sort of shock announcement has led to a succession. Perhaps they should make a mini-series about it. A succession problem. There are no clear front runners. The Deputy Premier, Roger Cook, has thrown his hat into the ring. Rita Saffioti, who's the Transport Minister, is throwing her hat in the ring, and it's believed Amber Jade Sanderson, the Health Minister, will do so as well. Whoever they do elect, Jack, it ain't going to be the rock star.
No, but you get a job like that, and given their current seat status, the Liberals only hold 2, don't they? You're almost certainly going to win the next election, and so you're going to get 6 years of being a premier.
Yeah, look, it's hard to see how the Liberal Party comes back. In fact, the opposition is, the WA Nationals, not linked to the Nationals in the Eastern Seaboard. Look, there's one issue that's arisen, Jack, and that is the burnout factor on public figures. We've had a number of resignations, kind of shock resignations from world leaders recently. Is the pressure getting too much? The social media inculcation, obviously we had a pandemic. McGowan was subject to death threats. There were times when his car was surrounded by idiots. Is public life just getting too hard now to handle for long periods of time.
Well, I was watching my WhatsApp feed yesterday when
it doesn't seem to be affecting President Erdogan, by the way.
When this announcement was made, and the first question, the first cab off the rank was, is it a Nicola Sturgeon resignation? I.e., is there something messy about to land?
Yes.
And the second one is, was it a Jacinda Ardern resignation? Which means
parallels drawn.
I think the resignation for the theory with that is that she had a good job coming up. And I said, well, the ambassadorship to the United States is gone. The High Commissioner to the UK is gone. So they're the two best jobs. You're not going to get either of those out of the federal government.
Look, I did know when we should think about our friends in the cooker movement, Jack, there was an earthquake in Melbourne yesterday or Sunday morning as we record this. Monday morning, or late Sunday. And that, with the McGowan resignation, has spooked a lot of people in the conspiracy world.
I have a daughter who lives quite close to Sunbury, which is the epicentre of it, and I heard from her. She said the dog barked, and that was about it.
Oh, yeah, look, it was a relatively, I think the wall shook for a while and cats got very scared. Yes, there was some posts that I did come across indicating that Dan Andrews had been arrested, Jack, and is currently awaiting extradition to Guantanamo Bay. Yeah. And then the McGowan resignation occurred. So you can see how these people think, and they've just gone bananas over this. I just think if you're a politician, like a prize fighter, it is best to bow out on top, and McGowan clearly has done. Mark McGowan has clearly done that.
Particularly state premiers, the job's sort of all-consuming because the government revolves around you to a much bigger extent than it does around a federal government revolves around a prime minister. So it's a real 24/7 thing. Yeah. And I can that's why he would have been better off staying with the racing, gaming and the hotels.
He might have some liver problems, that's all. He might have one or two liver problems.
And he might have burned through some money at the track. But the Premier's job is really tough. There's just no doubt about it because you are such a public figure.
Yeah, indeed. Now, look, I just really want to stick with that metaphor of prize fighters, Jack, because like prize fighters, many politicians just cannot get the timing right. And there's always one more. They can be dragged out for one more contest. But McGowan has rejected all of that, and so many of them, get voted out rather than resign.
Most of them, almost all of them, get voted out or disposed of by their own party.
Look, we must say, indeed, it's usually in the party room where it occurs. We must just quickly say that McGowan's wife Sarah looked very, very happy at the announcement. It meant that life would return to some form of normality fairly soon. The Governor General's wife, Jack, what's she doing? She's a songstress. She's belting out songs. She attends charity events, which is great, and it's part of her role. And then she writes some songs about them, Jack. It's very strange, isn't it?
She was a primary school teacher, and I discovered, and she looks just like she's singing and sounds just like she's singing to the great church.
Exactly like that, yeah. But there have been some
It's a very odd thing for a Governor General's wife to be doing.
Very, very strange. And I have seen footage of, VIPs and guests at Yarralumla having to sort of sit around and try and join in while she'll belt out a song, and it really is that primary school classroom. Join with me now. You're not singing. But there have been some issues around David Hurley. I mean, it ran in Senate estimates, I think, over a week ago that Hurley's the Hurley's daughter was married at Yarralumla at the expense of the Hurleys. They were given an invoice, I think, of some $37,000. and that was quickly repaid, and it was determined that no breaches had been made of any protocols or rules. But at the same time, if you and I wanted to get married, Jack, which we now lawfully can, we wouldn't be allowed to trundle up to Yarralumla and get it done.
No, we wouldn't. I think we're first cousins. We wouldn't be allowed. Would we?
we wouldn't be allowed to reproduce, but we would be allowed to marry.
Oh, okay.
There are other issues around David Hurley in particular. I think that he came out in the most unvice-regal promotion of a building company that had done some renovation work for him, which he deeply regretted afterwards. The trouble with the role of the Governor-General is that no government in power or even in waiting wants to see a change. So the Governor-Generals can get away with quite a lot, Jack.
They can. No one wants to be the person who taps them on the shoulder and tells them you got to go.
Yeah, exactly right. Because it's that consistency, it's the sort of devil you know. And as Gough Whitlam found out, I think this John Kerr would be terrific. A terrific appointment. It didn't end well, as we know.
Gough was excellent at giving advice, not so good at taking it.
There you go. The Voice, Jack, where are we now? I think the government is stuck to its has stuck to the wording of the question. So the Voice will, if approved by the people in a referendum and a date yet to be fixed, will continue to advise the executive, it will advise the executive and will advise the bureaucracy and will advise the parliament. So they've stuck to their guns. The opposition or the no vote campaign seems to have done quite well. I did watch an interview with the head of the no vote,
Warren Mundine.
Warren, yeah, with Walker, and he seemed pretty. This was on NTIV, this is the Indigenous network, or the Indigenous channel. He seemed pretty pleased with where they were, with where they are, I guess, on an assessment of polling, and I'd have to reluctantly agree with that. I think 47-53 within a margin of error. That's 50-50.
Yeah. What did Mick Gooder say a couple of weeks ago?
Noel had a crack at him.
Yeah.
I like Mick, by the way.
He said, we can't afford to lose it. I know we've compromised all our lives, but right now we're at the pointy end. And if there needs to be a compromise to get over the line, let's do it. And he got jumped on all.
Noel gave him a touch-up.
Yeah, from Noel Pearson. He'd have made a great halfback flanker, Noel Pearson, wouldn't he?
Yeah. He has just got a fantastic, almost Keating-like ability with an insult, and a very great speaker as well.
Another Voice supporter, Sean Gordon, said this: it's up to the PM to determine. If it's not winnable, he needs to make a decision about what is winnable for the Australian people. And I think that's pretty right. And I think they haven't done that.
I think Albanese's position, he really has locked in behind, of course, there's a memorial service for Yunupingu a week ago. And the Prime Minister's comments have just reinforced that what Yunupingu wanted is what he will support. So I think he's very locked in now.
He is, and I think that's an error, but it's been made now, and the consequences will fall where they will.
I really don't, and we're not going to touch on it today, but if this referendum is lost, I don't know where we go with reconciliation in this country. I don't know where we go from that. So it is absolutely critical.
I agree it's going to be very difficult, which is why I think more needed to be done to get this right, and it hasn't been done.
All right. Watching it very carefully, you have been, Jack, the inquiry, the Sofronoff inquiry into the Learman case in the ACT. The police have all been through the witness box now, Jack. How did they get on?
They went better than Mr. Drumgold, but that's a pretty low bar to get over, isn't it? You know,
And that's Shane Drumgold, the ACT prosecutor.
Yeah, the
Has he stood down? Is he stood down?
Well, he stood himself down. He took himself off on leave. So they went okay. They came out with a few bruises, but did pretty well. Your pal Steve Rice.
Rice wrote a good piece about this on Saturday. Yeah,
it was excellent. He pointed out that the police walked back their criticisms of, or most of their criticisms of the Victims of Crime Commissioner Heidi Yates. But she goes in the witness box this week, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But look, I'm told Shrofanov is a first-class lawyer, one of the best in the country, and we just have to wait and see how he plays the game. I mean, it's in good hands.
Representing Mr. Drumgold, and this was highlighted by Ricey on the weekend, is none other than Mark Tedeschi, Jack.
Yep.
The man who prosecuted Ivan Milat.
Yes.
I think he also may have prosecuted Nettie Smith too, although he may have actually represented Nettie. I'd need to check that, so I don't want to. So they've been around for a very long time. So the ACT prosecutor has Mark Tedeschi, and the policeman agreed under Tedeschi's questioning that Moller had not been wrong in his approach to the case. It was a rare concession by Moller, but in any case a moot point. All parties to the inquiry, including police, have agreed Drumgold was within his rights to prosecute Learman. And as you say, the matter will now await the determination. More evidence to come this week.
So Shrofanov stood back and said, "They're all in the courtroom," and he says, "Does anyone want to take issue with whether he had was within his rights to prosecute?" And there was silence. He let the silence flow for a while, but as Stephen Rice points out, the issue goes beyond that. It's to whether he overstepped the mark in prosecuting. And Rice's view is that Tedeschi's been unable to shake the impression that his client, Mr. Drumgold, was caught up in the fervour of the Me Too movement, leading him into fundamental errors in his handling of the case. So that's the big issue that's still alive for mine.
Right. And of course, it also puts a spotlight on the role or the relationship between prosecutors and police, which is often a bit vexed anyway, isn't it?
Between?
It's probably gone the other way here. What we often see is the police are very keen to prosecute, but a prosecutor will say, no, you don't have all your ducks in a row yet.
Yeah.
And then go back and do some more work. That's often. So they are two separate entities. And they don't necessarily collaborate and coordinate and get on all that well.
They're not always singing from the same song sheet, that's for sure.
That's a beautiful metaphor.
And Shrofanov may have some suggestions to make about that when he files his report.
Speaking of claims, Jack, Lydia Thorpe has got some claims against the Greens. We don't quite know what they are, but apparently the Greens might be a bit racist, Jack, according to Lydia.
Well, that's what she says, she's all gearing up to march off to the court. She says,
"Really, that will be interesting." She had a superb...
That'll be standing room only in the court if that actually ever happened.
well, there is already. Or now that she's gone, there is an Indigenous member of Parliament representing the Greens. What I love, going back a few months now, is when she was still a member of the Greens and the spokesperson for Indigenous Affairs, she just turned around to all her colleagues and said everything about the Voice. I'm the only one allowed to talk about it, including their leader, Adam Bandt, who went, that's right. You know, and it was very clear to all Greens. I guess we can call them a caucus, to all members of the Greens federal caucus that the situation didn't work, and apparently Lydia Thorpe came. They had a retreat, Jack, and over the course of that weekend, Lydia determined that she was pretty much on her own in her opposition to the voice. And
I'm not surprised they had a
that.
retreat. We used to have them at my Catholic boarding school, and the Greens resemble a sort of a quasi-religion in that regard. Lydia's not a party person. She needs to be in a party of one.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. She had a nice old screaming match in estimates.
That can be a good
week.
thing, but she's a Brian Harradine, Ted Mack sort of person. She's independent.
Yeah, she had a stand-up shouting match in estimates there. I think it was with Marion Scrigmore, but I may be wrong. Might have been McCarthy. But McCarthy ended up saying, was yelling out, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. They were both screaming at each other, telling each other they should be ashamed of themselves. And then afterwards they said, no, we can still work together, which I thought was really funny. The PricewaterhouseCoopers brouhaha is not going away, Jack, with PwC. Under fire, now they have directed 9 of its partners to take the old gardening leave, mate. Go and get the dog washed and go and tend to the garden while we have a good look into this. Where's this going to end, Jack?
They're trying very hard to get on top of it. I saw they'd sent a letter, issued a public letter, which was, it's a bit too long. I think it was 3 pages. And,
that's too long for a public letter.
Yeah.
Who's reading that?
No one's going to read past about the first 2 paragraphs. So, what did the great story about Churchill during World War II? Even on serious matters, he would send off a memo to someone. Please answer me in one half type page of quarto size, no more. If you can't give me the answer in that, you're sacked.
Ronald Reagan used to get the 5-minute videos, Jack. So so he'd get across an issue, particularly in his second term as president. I mean, besides the loss of confidence in the Australian bureaucracy that's occurring around these issues of consultancies and what have you, I think PwC thought, oh, no, this isn't much of a problem at all, but now they realise it is.
Oh, no, I think they thought it was serious, but perhaps they haven't handled it quite as well as they might have.
All right. Now we move over to the United States, Jack, and the debt limit deal has been reached. I'll just start by saying it's one of Biden's actual strengths, isn't it? He's got an ability to negotiate across the divide, perhaps much better than Barack Obama ever was, perhaps in the same league as the Clintons.
Although when there was a debt limit stoush on in Barack Obama's time as president and Joe was vice president, Harry Reid, who was the president of the
Democrat, yep,
of the Senate, leading Democrat in the Senate, he told Barack Obama that, look, we'll sit down and deal with you, but as long as Biden's not in the room.
Well, I hear it a little differently, Jack, and that if we have such a thing as a teledex these days, Biden's teledex is full of people from both sides of politics. He can ring them up. He can speak to them at any given time. In any event, we have a debt limit deal reached. And reading in the Washington Post today, some of the climate change activists are pretty unhappy with it because it takes away some of the what was the major spending bill that got through the Biden administration?
The Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes, which
amusingly named.
Yeah, which is amusingly named because it does involve quite a lot of spending. But a deal has been reached. It must go through the Congress, Jack, by June 7. Or government bureaucracy shuts down and hell on earth takes place in global markets.
And it will.
You think it'll go through?
Yes.
It seems like it has the support of moderate Republicans. Where do you think the wonderful Congresswoman for Georgia would sit on this, Jack? Do you think she'll be voting yes or no?
You mean Marjorie Taylor Greene?
MTG, yes.
Oh, it doesn't matter. She's the Lydia Thorpe of the Republicans. She's in a party of one, really.
She was the acting speaker in the House just last week, Jack. Did you? I don't know if you saw any footage of it. It was very funny.
Yeah, I did.
She banged the gavel, demanding that there be some order, and insisting that that the Congress or the House was a place where uproar and upheaval is unacceptable. After practicing quite a bit of it herself, I think I don't know if she's still carrying the shooter into the House, but she was doing that a fair bit. And the big news, of course, is that RDS is formally in the campaign, had a bit of a shambolic launch that he arranged with Elon Musk, a sort of public town hall meeting where the announcement was made, and of course they have a server overloads and all sorts of embarrassment. The issue that I would say about that is that everyone's talking about it, so therefore it wasn't a bad thing. And he did raise quite a lot of small donor money in the wake of it, $1 million in the first hour, Jack.
Yeah,
so the battle is on.
$8 million for the day, I think.
$8 million for the day, $1 million in the first hour, and those are piddling amounts of money. DeSantis doesn't really need the money. What he needs is that small donor group, because it locks in sort of grassroots support.
It wasn't that it was $8 million; it was $8 million from small donors.
It'd be $8 million from 8 million people. Well, not quite, but perhaps 2 million people, let's say. And so, so that overall it ended reasonably well. The Trumpster, unsurprisingly, got the caps lock out. Gave it a good hard press and just started slamming away at Ron DeSanctimonious.
He did.
And has recently, and rather oddly in my opinion, described DeSantis as being responsible for a woke Disney. I don't know, quite sure how that works.
Well, Donald's not sure which side he's on in the Disney dispute. He keeps veering backwards and forwards, depending how the wind's blowing.
Well, let me just tell you, Jack, and this just popped up, but Target. No, not Target. God, no, I'm getting confused with a rather lovely video from comedian Brent Terhune, over the weekend. But we now have Make America Great Again Pride tees. Oh, God, I wish there was a date on this because it says Trump Pence. So it probably means 2020. That the Trumpster was actually knocking out a bit of gear with all the rainbow stuff on it, Jack.
Was he really? Oh, there you go.
I'm just saying someone's popped it up. It was 2020 because it's and they Make America Great Again in vibrant rainbow colours, baseball caps, T-shirts, all that sort of stuff.
And to be fair, DeSantis has got his work cut out. Trump's got about a 30-point lead in the polling for the
nationally,
nomination.
I think 31, isn't it? Nationally 31, and if we look at Iowa and New Hampshire, which are the two early primary states of Iowa caucus, I think he's 20-odd points down in Iowa and a similar amount in New Hampshire. I just can't think of the specifics. But, yeah, got some work to do, hasn't he?
It's certainly doable, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a bruising nomination battle. But we can tell that the Democrats think DeSantis has a chance because they're all over him like a back flanker,
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, for mine, DeSantis has to develop. I mean, I've been reading some stuff in WAPO and New York Times, Politico, etc., just recently, and they're all saying that a large group of candidates for the Republican primary will suit Donald Trump. I presume that's, looking at 2016 and how that all sort of fell apart for those other candidates. But I think DeSantis in particular needs to develop a strategy on how to deal with Trump. And I think it could take two forms. It's either roll the shirt sleeves up and get stuck in verbally, or rise above. But his early his announcement and his subsequent media stuff has been barely to mention Trump at all, and I think that's a mistake. Your thoughts?
Oh, I think he's playing it reasonably well at the moment.
I think he's got to get stuck in. He's got to get stuck in before the debates. He's got to get stuck in, and he's got to actually give Trump a bit of a slap. That's my view.
He's got to build some momentum, and I think he will. I think the thing that the Democrats are worried about is that if he gets through the semi-final against Trump and gets in the final, all he's going to have to do is stay on his feet. And I think that's right.
It's probably
sometimes
that's the prevailing wisdom anyway. But there's a lot can go wrong in the meantime, isn't there?
Oh, of course it can. Stuff can always go wrong.
I mean, I'm not just talking about DeSantis.
He might end up like Scott Walker, who can't translate his state political career into a national one. But DeSantis is a long way in front of any other state governor I can remember. He's already neck and neck with Biden in the polling for a presidential election, if he gets there. And that's very early for a state governor to be neck and neck with an incumbent president.
Yeah, it probably reflects a bit more on the very ordinary approval ratings for Biden, I think.
It does.
That if you ask someone, would you like Biden or would you like Hong Kong Jack, they're probably going to go for Hong Kong Jack, and they don't really know who Hong Kong Jack is. So that's where I think that a lot of that polling's coming from. But yeah, I think he's going to need a way of dealing with Trump, because Trump's going to do the old vaudeville routine in primary debates and that sort of stuff, and he really needs to develop a mechanism for dealing with that. And it's either get stuck in, get your hands dirty, and throw a bit of mud around yourself, or rise above. But you can't ignore Donald Trump. That's just ridiculous stuff.
That's for him to sort out. By the way, if you're reading the New York Times, Politico, and the Washington Post, you need to take a leaf out of your employer's book and start reading the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post.
Look, I do. In fact, I do.
You need to broaden your reading there, mate.
No. I do read the Wall Street Journal every day, but it was those three, WAPO, NYT, and Politico, who asserted that a large primary field would suit Trump. There were three pieces that ran almost simultaneously across those three media.
It is websites. A little bit different. Well, they all sing from the same song sheet all the time, the three of those. It is a little bit different to 2016 in the sense that Trump's got a big lead. He's 30 points in front of DeSantis, but DeSantis is in his 20s. No one else is over 4 or 5.
Yeah, we've got Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley might be 5, and everyone else is less than that.
Yeah, that's about it.
Mike Pence is 3.
Well, he hasn't even announced. Pompeo hasn't announced. And that's what I think these articles were alluding to, whether that would be. Who's the other one? This sort of odd person who's in there. Almost a almost a joke candidate. Anyway. Not to worry, because we're moving on now to the Ukraine. Now, Jack, just in the last couple of days, missiles and drone attacks have occurred around Kyiv at night. Zelensky on Monday morning our time, it was a day ago as we record this, came out and applauded and praised the military responsible for their missile defence systems, but there were some casualties and there were some buildings struck. And that would seem to me to be the Russian way of putting pressure on what we know now from US intelligence assessments, is that Ukraine's missile defence systems are becoming weakened. So that would explain the heightened attacks that last couple of days from the Russian military, and it is all in advance of its Ukraine's long expected counter-offensive, armed really to the back teeth by NATO nations, led by the United States. They've got the Abrams tanks there, Jack. They've been training people on new weapon systems. And the counteroffensive will happen not within a week. It will happen within days, I would think. It might actually be going on as we speak. It will happen very, very soon.
Yes. So it would seem.
So it would seem. We'll have. There are other reports too, and this must be said, comes from the Ukrainian Defense Department, is that there have been reports of Wagner Group mercenaries withdrawing from Bakhmut. Well, it doesn't seem to be much worth fighting for in Bakhmut anyway. It would only be a symbolic thing. Bakhmut will probably change hands as a result of this counteroffensive. The only other thing we can say with any certainty.
Wagner Group coming back from the front lines and being replaced by more expendable reserve troops, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's what would seem to be the case, and also
which seems to be the Russian tactic. Really, will be we've got superiority in numbers, and we've got superiority in time. The Ukrainians have a superiority in equipment at the moment. But that relies on a never-ending supply and lots of money being spent by the West, and the Russians, I would think, would expect that they can outweight that.
I think there's another thing you're missing there, Jack. Excuse me. That's morale of troops, and I would expect the Ukrainian morale to be absolutely top. That we might call it the sort of the pressure gauge, if you like. But Russian conscripts are not likely to be as fervent about their jobs. So I think that's another thing. All we can say with any certainty is that this counteroffensive will occur at some point in south or southeastern Ukraine, and with all of the weaponry that they now have. I've been talking about the M1 Abrams tank. It is far faster, far more manoeuvrable than anything the Russians have, and with longer range than their weapons. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to happen. Really, it may actually have occurred before we actually go to air, Jack.
Before you hear this, that's right.
Yeah, so that is coming, and we'll certainly be following that up in future episodes. Look, you sent me a bit of a link in the Daily Mail, not known for their foreign service reporting, Jack, generally speaking, but they did have a piece in there by a bloke from Chatham House, who's probably not all that memorable. I don't want to be rude to the man, but he reckons regime change in Russia, the ousting of Putin, would actually make things much worse than better. Well, that was his speculative position.
Can I just explain? If it was in the Daily Mail, there's a sort of about a 60% chance it was stolen from somewhere else. So they can be a reliable source of news reporting, provided you understand, provided you read it and say, well, they wouldn't have written that themselves. They would have just lifted it from some other poor schmuck.
Vladimir Putin, I've never heard of him. He's not in Hollywood. He's not, it doesn't fit that sort of celebrity stuff that they do. But look, it's a reasonable. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to discuss what happens if Putin is ousted. But let me just say, let's just stick with the fact that Putin hangs around. Or Putin hangs around, or Putin doesn't. It drops off the branch. Whatever happens, Russia is going to be a pariah state for a very, very long time. To the West, for a very, very long time, and even if they pulled the pin and said, all right, we're going to have an armistice and we're going to sort it all out, we're going to go back to our February 2022 borders, then there'd still be a pariah for a period of time anyway. So the longer this goes, that longer that pariah character is going to stick with them, economic pariah. I did see what's his name, Prigozhin, the Wagner Group leader, suggested that Russia needed to be more like North Korea for a couple of years. Jack, did you see that?
I did see that. Yes.
That's really not. I don't think that's going to boost anybody's. It's not going to be a great boost for national pride in Russia, is it? I mean, people eating.
Russian TV will have to have. Cooking shows on what to do with bark.
Cooking with bark. All right. Well, the counteroffensive will be underway very, very soon, and we'll keep a very close eye on that. Jack, Sky News in the UK is reporting that the French government has banned short-haul flights.
They're going to make him catch the train.
So Paris and Nantes, I think it is the right pronunciation. Lyon and Bordeaux, for example, they're about 2.5 hours by train. I think Nantes is a little bit quicker than that. That's where you got to go. You got to jump on the much famed very fast rail in France.
Yeah. Today is 45 years since the May 68 riots, and I think it was on the day we're recording this, the 30th of May? That Charles de Gaulle dissolved the National Assembly and told the striking workers that he would declare a state of emergency within 2 days if they didn't get back to work. A momentous, he sort of basically stared down a revolution, did Charles de Gaulle. We should have a chat about 1968 generally at some stage in the future.
All right. But meanwhile, what would this do for some of the airlines in France? Not just French airlines, but other commercial people movers. It's going to mess up their business plans a bit, isn't it? Business models. Catch the train if you're in France. Does that actually go for very wealthy people getting around in private jets, Jack?
Oh, these things never affect very wealthy people in private jets.
I can't imagine how it would. You might remember there's an app now which Elon Musk was very annoyed about, which covers the flight paths of celebrity private jet flights, and some of them were 15 minutes, Jack. Santa Barbara to Santa Barbara to LA.
Yeah, some of them were sort of from one side of LA to the other side of LA,
It does seem a little excessive.
I know the traffic's bad there, but really,
Yeah, you got the big comfy cars too. They don't get around Toyota Corollas. Jack, India, a government official has been suspended after he ordered a reservoir to be drained to retrieve his phone. Jack, you would have lost a few phones in your time, a couple in the cab, that sort of thing.
I've actually got a couple. I got one back in Hong Kong. This wouldn't happen in Sydney, I can tell you. But left a phone in a taxi, and the taxi driver actually brought it back and left it at the security box downstairs.
Well, I don't know about Sydney, but Melbourne, I called an Uber. And I was heavily refreshed, and this wasn't so long ago. I was heavily refreshed and got back to my hotel and realised I've left the phone behind. And the guy in the Uber made every attempt to get hold of me about 24 hours later. By that stage, I'd already popped down to the Vodafone shop and got myself a new phone, so I just told him to get rid of it. Honesty does exist. But this one's a little bit different, Jack, because the bloke's actually, it's not just, call a cab, call an Uber. This is a bloke who's just demanded that this reservoir be drained, millions of litres of water pumped out of it. Did they find the phone?
They did find the phone, but unfortunately, it was a bit damp and didn't work.
They don't like water. They tend not to like water, these things.
Yeah.
You can whack them. You can whack them in a plastic bag in the freezer. Now, don't trust me on this too much, but it will shift a lot of the water. The other thing you can do is put it in a big packet of rice, Jack, and that will...
So I'm told. Anyway, this fellow was a local food inspector, so he had some governmental authority, and he said, open the gates. We're going to drain this lake and find my phone.
The divers were called in. They couldn't find it, and that's when the diesel pump came in. Oh, he's but environmental terrorist as well. He said he had verbal permission from an official to drain some water into a nearby canal, adding that the official said it would in fact benefit the farmers who would have more water. The pump ran for several days, emptying out roughly 2 million litres, enough to irrigate 600 hectares of farmland. His mission was stopped when another official from the Water Resource Department arrived following a complaint. And the quote, which I just love here, is, "He has been suspended until an inquiry. Water is an essential resource and it cannot be wasted like this."
Yeah, he said that there was official information on the phone, which is why it had to be retrieved. But really, he should have taken a leaf out of your book and skipped down to the local Vodafone and picked up a newie.
Pick up a newie, and you'll find everything that you had there and thought you lost is actually still there. Turkey, Jack, as we predicted, boldly predicted.
Turkiye, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Turkiye.
Yeah. Oh, Turkiye.
Turkiye. Yes, we need to be.
Yeah, it's Turkey.
It is Turkey. No matter what Erdogan. It's an Erdogan. It was an Erdogan push, by the way, this move away from Turkiye. And it followed some pressure from some of his exporters that people were mocking Turkey, and so it had to be called Turkiye. But as we boldly predicted a couple of weeks ago, President Erdogan has been re-elected in the runoff, 52-48 pretty much. I would hazard a guess, Jack, that if the opposition ever had a chance to knock him off, this was the one that went begging.
Yep. They missed it.
What's it mean for the West, Jack? What's it mean for NATO?
Well, he's been around a long time. He started out, he went to jail first up. He was jailed for inciting religious violence, I think, first up. And then he turned that, he got a bit of publicity out of that and became mayor of Istanbul, and then he became prime minister of Turkey. And then I think he was the first president who was actually elected by a national popular vote. So he's been a transformative figure in Turkish politics and remains very popular. But what it means for the West is tricky to know. He's not a very predictable ally for anybody.
We suggested last week, I think 2 weeks ago, that NATO and the EU and the US, etc., will at least say, well, he's the bastard we know.
But even when he's the bastard we know, he's the bastard. We're never quite sure what he's going to do.
He's still a bit unpredictable. And, of course, there are some unresolved matters, including the Swede and Finn entrance into NATO, which he's jumped up and down about, particularly the Swedes. And you might want to explain what that's all about, Jack. That's because...
That's about the Turkish nationals who are resident in Sweden, some of whom are Kurdish and are supporters of, I forget the name of the party, the Kurdish Workers' Party, I think it is.
KWP, which is a listed terrorist organisation in Australia, Jack. So that's the background there, and many people around the world consider the Kurds to be great freedom fighters, but the KWP was involved in a lot of terrorism, bombings and so forth throughout Turkey.
Yeah, it's a complicated area, isn't it really?
It is a bit complicated. The Finns, Jack.
What was it? I think it was Churchill said of the Balkans, a very similar area, that unfortunately the Balkans produced more history than it could consume locally.
It's a nice way of saying perpetual conflict. The Finns, we just mentioned before, Jack, you would have thrown a bloody garden party over this. They've just opened a nuclear reactor, the Olkiluoto.
Oh, no.
Finnish is a devilishly difficult language, Jack. They've just opened their nuclear reactor. Only 14 years took to build.
On matters Finnish, I'm still in mourning because they got rid of the Prime Minister. But
that was wrong. But look, in terms of just pure aesthetics, prices for Finnish power have plunged. It's actually the Olkiluoto. I think that's probably the best pronunciation you'll get from me in Finnish today. The number 3 nuclear reactor. It's actually been running for a year under testing, but as of the middle of April, it's been online, and prices plunged. 0.3 cents per kilowatt hour in Finland, Jack.
It has. It took them hardly any time to build it.
Only the 14 years. And interestingly enough, it came around about the same time that the Germans decommissioned their 3 nuclear reactors. But guess who built the Finnish reactor, Jack?
Well, I don't know. The South Koreans, isn't it?
French and German consortium.
Oh, okay.
So they are very pleased and proud of their nuclear reactor. I did see it's on the Baltic there somewhere, and that it will lift Finnish energy or the contribution of nuclear to in Finland to French levels up to around 60%, Jack. 60% of all electricity generated in Finland will come from nuclear as a result of this. As a result of this,
and the Finns are very high consumers of electricity, probably because it's so cold.
It's a little bit cool there. It gets a little bit cool in the winter months and a little bit dark for very long periods. Just to go through that current mix, in fact, this is a 2021 of Finland, 23.6. Of their electricity generation was nuclear. It's likely to go up to as high as 60. Hydro 15.8, biofuels and waste 14.2, wind 8.1, coal 5.3, 7% natural gas, oil next to nothing, and solar next to nothing. So there you go. That's the breakdown on Finland there, Jack. And we're going to move over to Japan and energy. And Japan is not unique, but it is remarkable in that is a net importer of energy. Not a net importer. It requires just about every form of fuel to be brought into the country. Tell us a little bit about what you know about Japan's energy requirements, Jack.
Well, the renewables are making a bit of a moving up the chain, if you
they
like.
are, yeah.
But fairly slowly.
And not as highly as projected on my reading of it.
No. So the predictions, I'm a bit of an evidence-based man rather than projection man, but sometimes you got to look at them at least. On the projections, by 2030, they think renewables might be around 38%.
Right.
But that would still mean, coal and gas making up a decent chunk of it.
Yeah, and there's nuclear, of course, which is a bit vexed with the Fukushima leak in 2011, wasn't it? 2011. Time flies there. Just to go over.
So I've got a question for some of our listeners who I know think I'm nuts, as they made me into a meme at one stage. I think I'm a bit nuts on climate change.
Yeah, it has been said.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, because I'm kind of open-minded about this, but I'm an evidence-based person rather than a guesswork-based person. All those years as a lawyer turns you into that. At the moment in Australia, we say, well, look, coal's a stranded asset, and and gas is not very far in front of that. And that's all predicated on the basis that demand for those Australian products is going to diminish. The way I see it at the moment is that renewables are increasing at a pretty good rate, and they are taking up all of the new demand for energy as energy demand increases worldwide. Leaving fossil fuels at about the same level. Now, what I'd like to know is when renewables are going to really start to lower that figure. Is it going to be 2030, 2050, 2060?
I think we sort of reached a peak last year. I think that let's just let our listeners come up with an answer. All right, that's fine. But now you've got Europe. Basically, across Europe, you've got 40% renewables. That's kind of where we are. And Japan, although slowing, 36 to 38 by 2030. That's about where Australia is, by the way, too, in terms of renewable contribution. But so I don't know that I agree with the term stranded asset in regard to coal or indeed gas. I don't think they're stranded assets. I think they will continue to contribute to the energy mix around the world, particularly in the developing world for some period of time. I agree with you on that, but you will see those shares start to change. Those contributing shares. That's why I've just mentioned the Finnish one. And we'll go through the Japanese one, which is just, I've got a breakdown of their energy mix, just to give you an idea, and we'll sort of keep in touch with this, hopefully over a period of time. I did their, let me just find it, their 2022, according to the International Energy Agency, the share of renewables was about 15% in 2016, increased by more than 1% 1% per year. Now is at 22%, or it was in 2021, but only increased by 0.3% in 2022. This is what we're talking about, this slowing down. Among these, solar power generation accounted for nearly 10% of electricity, 9.3% in the previous year. They're getting very little from wind. Hydroelectricity was down from 7.1% of their total electricity contributions, down from 7.8%. By month, the share of electricity generated from renewables is highest in May, which is a warm period in Japan. So that's their mix at the moment. I'm just trying to find what coal contributes and what gas contributes. And
it's about 19% coal.
90% coal, and then oil. I think
and gas is a little bit smaller than the coal at the moment, but the gas is going up fast as well.
Yeah, all right, okay. Well, we'll just keep an eye on this. We might just sort of do this every week. Look at major sort of OECD countries and look at their energy mix, and it's just going to be interesting to see how those change over time.
But there's the challenge for our critic. I quite enjoy getting some criticism, I've got to say, and I love the meme. But there's the challenge for you. Tell me what year it will have a significant impact on Australian fossil fuel exports.
I think it's begun. I think we reached peak coal in 2022.
I mean significant, 25% drop in Australian fossil fuel exports would be a good benchmark.
Well, look, let's presume that something of that order happens, Jack. Then really the mining industry has to turn itself around. Probably needs some government support. That Australia's got a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be really important to rip out of the ground as we go into the future. I mean, we've talked about lithium, for example. We've talked about various rare metals that are absolutely sought after. And Australia's got a pretty good future in those alone.
Yes.
All right. So we'll stick with that. It's a good thing to do. We might have a look at Canada next week, Jack, and perhaps Mexico and the OECD, both OECD countries. So I've made a little bit of a note there. We'll look at their energy mix, how it's changed and how it might change into the future. And we'll keep going with that. We might want to have a look at Australia's at some point too, mate. And we certainly will. And moving on to sport, Jack. We're there already. Meg Lanning, the wonderful captain of Australia, the great cricketer, probably, as I've argued, the most successful sporting team in the world right now, over a protracted period where they've just dominated their opposition. Meg Lanning very sadly has returned home with what is described by Cricket Australia as health issues, best dealt with in Australia. And we don't want to pry too much, but Meg, of course, had a bit of a sit out of the game for a little while there to refresh herself mentally. Alyssa Healy will captain the women's squad. They have a one-off test beginning on the 22nd to the 27th of June. We talk about burnout factor, Jack. When I look at someone like Meg Lanning, I think, Meg, you're probably too hard on yourself.
Yeah, might be time to put the feet up.
Yeah, look, I mean, look, she's just a wonderful cricketer. She's been a fantastic leader. Alyssa Healy's a wonderful cricketer too. She'll captain and wicket keep, Jack. It's one of those things that never was allowed to happen in the old days, or very rare.
No, very rarely. I think Brian Tabor captained a test for Australia.
Yeah, a test here and there. Adam Gilchrist might have captained a test here and there. I think he did in India, didn't he, when Steve Waugh was out injured, or Ricky Ponting, I think, was out injured. We just wish Meg Lanning well. She's been a wonderful ambassador for Australia and for the game of cricket for a long period of time. Hope she's well and hope she makes a full recovery and she's out belting the ball to the boundary as soon as possible, Jack. It's a huge winter of cricket, Southern Hemisphere winter. The Test Championship on June 7, only 8 more sleeps, Jack, and being broadcast live, free to air on Channel 7 in Australia. The squads have been announced, and not a lot of surprises there. It looks like Scott Boland is the preferred seamer ahead of Josh Hazlewood if he is. Josh Hazlewood if he can sort of prove his fitness, but he's had some fitness issues of late. So it would seem like Scott Boland, if Josh Hazlewood doesn't play, Scott Boland will replace him as the third quick. Not a lot of surprises there. Marnus Labuschagne's been making runs for fun so far. Stephen Smith hasn't gone all that well, besides taking a few blinding catches. You can see Todd Murphy and Matthew Renshaw in the squad. David Warner, of course, is in the squad. And that is the squad for the World Test Championship at the Oval and the first 2 tests of the Ashes.
It is. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. June 7, the test matches from England come on at right on beer o'clock, and they're on the television at my local.
A lot of late nights for us. It's a good thing that they're not playing day-night pink ball ones because it would be a lot worse. But, I think we kick off about 8 o'clock in the 8 o'clock in the evening.
I generally get through half the first session, maybe a bit more, having a pre-dinner drink. So, perfect.
Well, television's in bedrooms. That's why it's a good idea. So you can fall asleep, wake up, continue to watch a bit of cricket. So the Indian squad's also been announced. Not a lot of surprises there either.
No change, really.
No real change. Rohit Sharma's captain.
Misbah Pant still out after his motor car accident. So.
Yeah, he's for mine. It's a real tragedy that. Because he to me was the complete all format cricketer, just a great fighter with the bat in a test match, and for me he's the sort of $10 million a year cricketer. Probably the one who can replace Kohli as the biggest earner in the game. But look, they've got a very very good attack, led by their spinners, Jadeja and Ashwin, and we can't forget, of course, their quicks, who are very, very good as well. Also missing
5 tests in about 8 weeks, 7 weeks, I think.
Yeah, well, as soon as that one's done, the World Test Championship that'll finish on the 12th. Then Australia play the first test at Edgbaston on the 16th. Not quite 2 weeks later, but basically about 10 days later, they play at Lords, and then it's all crammed in. July 6th, Headingley, July 19, Old Trafford, and July 27th is the last of the 5 at the Oval. No Test cricket being played in August. Jack has been shoved aside for the 100.
Well, I think that the Oval Test we might get 1 day in August if it goes to 5 days.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a great series. The English series, and most of the World Test Championships are almost a sort of novelty and being played on turf that doesn't favour either Australia or India nominally. Going to be a great game, but then we've got the 5 tests against England, and they're really packed in. The fiasco at the AFL, Jack, that must be referring to the business of the 2 coaches. One, actually, the Brisbane Lions coach and the North Melbourne coach, Alistair Clarkson, who's away at the moment on sort of mental health leave. Is that the fiasco you're talking about?
Yeah, and it's getting worse, not better. I mean, there's not really much to say about it apart from the AFL need to Gillon McLachlan needs to step in there and fix this.
Well, how do you fix it?
Well, I think you've got to sit some people down and say this has got to be resolved.
You've got to basically say, I mean, the AFL's got to say, on the basis of the investigations it's made, the limited investigations and inquiries that it's made, it is not able to make a decision. It cannot make a decision because essentially the complainants have been wary of the AFL system. They made their thoughts and their allegations known in the Hawthorn Footy Club report, which apparently no one has seen. I guess McGowan might have seen and a couple of others. But in the end, they can say, look, we don't have an answer to this and leave it open to the civil courts. That seems to me to be the only issue, the only response.
And that means giving some people some information which they will find unpalatable, but it's time to be done.
Yeah, but that's all that can be done, right? I mean, they can't sort of run around offering apologies because they just don't have the information. They don't have the corroboration, the supporting information.
Yeah, the Hawthorn Football Club can choose to do what it wants to do, but the AFL just needs to sit down with people, give them some information that they might find uncomfortable, and move on. Yeah,
I did notice that the Hawthorn CEO stood down last week too, Jack. So it's taking its toll.
Yep, it has,
and needs to be resolved, as you say, Jack. Mate against
state
mate,
of origin,
state against state, mate against mate. Yeah, it's all happening in just over 24 hours as we record this. The first one's in Adelaide, Jack, at the beautiful Adelaide Oval there, and both sides. I think the Blues have been in camp there for a while. Not quite sure about the Maroons, how long they've been in Adelaide, but presumably from a fair period of time, and. The Blues are actually having a bond. Now, what did a bonding session mean to you in the rugby league world, Jack, 20 years ago?
It meant getting. It was not. They were normally in Bondi, staying at the Crown Plaza, what it was called in Bondi.
Yeah, that's right.
I meant walking 50 metres down the road to the pub and getting completely
absolutely smashed. And tonight's a free night. When they were in camp, tonight's a free night, and the coach would get on the piss with them and all this sort of stuff. Now, Jack, bonding, and there was often some disgraces that went hand in glove with the drinking/bonding sessions. But now, Jack, the Blues players are embracing Indigenous culture after a New Age origin bonding session, and believe it has united them. They've been taught an Indigenous chant by Latrell Mitchell, who'll miss the game. He's been ruled out with a calf strain. Josh Adokar. And has led them all on these Indigenous chants, Jack. It's a very multicultural New South Wales Blues, Jack. There are 6 from Samoa, or 3 from Tonga, 1 from Italy, although he really comes from Camden, as I understand it. Tommy Turbo, he's from Serbia. And Nathan Cleary, I don't know how he gets into Ukraine, and Hudson Young, but they're supposed to be from Ukraine. I don't know how that works, Jack. Some listener might tell us. Blues $1.80 to win, Maroons $2. You wouldn't mind Queensland and even money, would you?
I added in a little bit here from Twitter, which I thought you should know about. Your big Harry Mackay, the big forward from Carlton, former Coleman medalist.
Signed till 2030, yeah.
Yeah, at hardly any money at all. He's got a bit of a dose of the yips.
It's actually really hard to watch him play footy at the moment.
Yeah. Anyway, on Twitter they were talking about it, and some blokes jumped on and said, directed this to Matthew Richardson, the former Richmond player.
Richmond great.
As a former star forward in the AFL, what does Harry Mackay need to do to fix his goal kicking? An expert opinion on this would be great. And Richo's comment was, with all due respect, Chris, is this some sort of a joke? Because Matthew himself could be a bit patchy.
Did have some yips. He was generally pretty ordinary with when he was about 15 metres out.
Yeah,
on a 45-degree angle, he'd spray them.
There was a response straight away from a Carlton fan. Silvani's 300th game, for a Richmond fan, Silvani's 300th game, that would be Steve Silvani's 300th game, had you for first goal kicker, paying stupidly $12 on the tab. You missed from the goal square. Hit the post, I think. Carlton then scored a goal, so my money was gone. You then get the ball 55 metres out on the boundary and whack it through. Couldn't stay angry with him for very long at a time. Now, I don't know how much. I don't listen to the tally here in the footy, so I'm not sure how much the umpires
Richo's been talking
a
fair bit about this, yeah,
and how much the umpires are mic'd up and the people at home can hear it, because they're doing this in Major League Baseball now. And a couple of days ago, there was a Miami Marlins game on, and the umpires are all mic'd up. And there's been an appeal for a review of a decision at the home base, a home base call of out. And one of the umpires jumped in and says, the Marlins got their head up their ass, which was broadcast right across America. Even more amusingly, his fellow umpires didn't agree with him, and the decision was overturned.
Our umpires, I think, in the AFL, NRL, and of course rugby union, where they're almost gods, they're a lot more salubrious with their discussion. Richo has taken a bit of a position on Harry Mackay. He reckons he identified some different approaches from Mackay, who's lining up, not trying to kick around the corner all the time, but lining up with a drop punt now. Hasn't done him any good so far. Hasn't done him. It really is painful to watch him play, because once he gets the ball, and I'm starting to think that he goes, maybe I don't want to get the ball.
Yeah, the former Essendon full forward was talking about that. He says he dropped about 7 marks on the weekend, and he says you're starting to wonder whether he really wants to catch it.
I think he took 3 marks of the game, probably dropped about 8, including one on the chest, because he's just got all this clutter in his mind. I don't know what it is. I mean, Brendan Favola did offer to go down and assist him, and that was declined, and that's fine. But I think he needs someone. Perhaps the worst thing you can have is someone else in your ear, because there's lots of voices going on in there in the head at the moment, and adding to them by one may not be a great thing. But overall, look, he's a hell of a good footballer, and he's going to turn it around. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, it's just a bit painful to watch. As long as Fed was there during daylight hours, that'd be okay, And,
well, Richo, who's now, Richo's a wonderful character of the game, and Richmond supporters will have a deep and abiding love for the man. But yeah, he lined up. He had a very awkward drop punt kicking style if he was kicking from not far out from goal, and he'd usually ping him anywhere. And Harry Mackay's just one of those guys. I mean, look, Charlie Curnow, who's a beautiful kick of a football, a natural kick of the football. He kicked in a man of the mark on Friday night. It's pretty hard being a Carlton barrack at the moment, mate. I tell you what.
Then there was
about eight televisions this season.
Then there was the other fella who put it out on Driver Avenue from the forward flank. It was pretty awful to watch. Richo was always a pretty loved footballer, because he played the game passionately. He used to yell and scream at his teammates and all that sort of stuff.
He did.
I don't think anyone who saw it will ever forget when finally Richmond broke through and won the grand final. And he was a special comments man on the boundary line, and he was in tears when they had about 5 minutes to go. And they knew
they all
they
get teary, Jack, all the old blokes, don't they? Don't you remember when Geelong broke the drought and then the Swans broke the drought? And there they are, they're old men, just tears running down their cheeks. Yes, look, we hope, I certainly hope that Harry Mackay's yips, he's not a natural kick for goal. That's the thing. So he's got to spend a fair bit of time on the track and clearing his head. But look, a very intriguing round over the weekend too, Jack. I know we don't want to talk about we prefer to talk about issues than results, but I got I got 2 out of the 9 games on the weekend. There were a lot of surprises.
You wouldn't be too embarrassed about that. There were plenty of mates.
It was one time. It's the one sort of weekend where there were a lot of upsets, and I think even North Melbourne played pretty well against Collingwood. Didn't win, but they were only 5 goals short. And it's telling us that, with the exception of the Eagles, that it's still pretty even competition. That's a good
it's pretty
thing.
good.
All right, well, that wraps up.
Well, it's just before we go.
I know you've got something else. Something unscripted, Jack. Something ad-lib.
A new little segment to add in. Recipe of the week. I was cooking something last night.
Yeah.
And this is a recipe from my brother, my younger brother, who is a fabulous cook. Worked at, what was her name? Joy Snedden's restaurant. Billy Snedden's wife, Joyo, in East Melbourne. Terrific place.
Right.
This is the simplest thing you're ever going to cook. If you're cooking up dinner just for you and your partner or your wife, husband, whatever, it's 2 chicken breasts, then a nice heavy pot, plenty of water in it. Crank up the heat, get it boiling. Don't put any salt in it. Must not put salt in it, but you can slice up a lemon, put that in there, a couple of cloves of garlic, a couple of bay leaves. You get it boiling. You put the chicken breasts in the pot. You put the lid on and you turn it off. And then you go to the fridge and grab a beer, because you've got 30 minutes to an hour, whatever you want, really, to have a beer and throw a salad together. That's all you've got to do, and it comes out perfectly every time.
So this is Hong Kong Jack's poached chicken recipe, I guess.
So it's Hong Kong Jack's brother's poached chicken recipe, which means it's even better. But just one thing I wanted to ask you
Sounds a little
about.
light on seasoning, but I won't quibble. Go on.
Yeah, no. Well, see, you put something on the top, and because I'm in a bit of a health phase at the moment, I would love a bit of mayonnaise or aioli or something like that, or a nice little cream sauce. But no dairy and no flour, so I'm not doing that at the moment. So it got a little bit of Salmoreglio, a Sicilian sauce, just olive oil and lemon, really.
Okay.
With some salt and pepper and stuff. So all very good. But I'm reading the little container that the chicken pieces come in, right? And it says that these chickens were raised vegetarian, right?
Well, they are. They're not a meat eater, your chicken. Otherwise, we'd be being torn to shreds by them.
Worms and crickets are meat. They eat worms and crickets and all that sort of stuff. But what I was thinking was, well, because I'm not doing the eggs or the dairy, and the chickens are raised vegetarian, does that mean I'm a vegan or just a vegetarian?
Yourself? Not a vegan. No, not a vegan. You might be veering into vegetarian territory there. The line I loved about vegans is from The Simpsons, where Lisa falls in love with a sort of environmental activist who is a level 5 vegan, Jack. He can't eat anything that casts a shadow.
Oh, okay.
Always love that line. Very, very funny.
Yeah. Well, the old joke about vegans is, how do you tell a vegan, don't worry, they'll tell you.
Very good. And look, with that, and ad-libbed chicken recipe from Hong Kong Jack, that takes us out for this show, I think, episode 31 of our combination Australia and overseas podcast. We know we're getting through to a lot of you people because we're getting some, one bloke described our podcast, the best thing that he listens to all week. I'm going to grab the letter. We need that kind of flattery, Jack. We need that kind of
We love that kind of
emotional massage there. I'll bring that forward, and he's actually got some questions to ask, so I'll put him in next week's show.
But don't worry, we love the other kind of letters as well.
Oh, look, be as abusive as you like. I mean, we've been around for a long time, we've got very, very thick skins here. But and we do encourage you to complimentary or otherwise completely vile abuse. We'll accept that too. Drop me a line on Jack the Insider, or at Jack the Insider on Twitter DMs. That's how you can get hold of me. You can get hold of us on the Conditional Release Program at gmail.com, and a lot of people do. Or indeed, you can get hold of Jack on your Substack, Jack. Yell it out.
Yeah, HongKongJack.substack.com.
There you go. All right, listeners, and thanks very much for joining us once again. And we'll be back with you next week with episode 32. See you, folks.